Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry if I said that twice. We were waiting for our recording to start. We're about to get underway with our afternoon keynote speakers, and I am very pleased to be able to introduce the two of them to you. The first is Sam Gilchrist, and the next is Matt Maracle. So I'll tell you a little bit about Sam Gilchrist first. He was born in Sudbury and raised on Manitoulin Island and comes from a Scottish settler background. Being raised on Manitoulin allowed Sam to explore and learn from the land as he grew. Sam is a graduate of the Laurentian Indigenous Human Services Program and the Wilfrid Laurier Masters of Indigenous Social Work, as well as being a registered social worker with the Ontario College of Social Workers and Social Service Workers. Mr. Gilchrist's career has afforded him to work with various First Nation communities and organizations across the helping field and post-secondary education. Sam continues to reside on Manitoulin and explore and learn from the land with his wife and 3 children. Sam is the executive director of Gwekwaadziwin Miikan, and I'm sorry, I'll look to you to help me with that in a little bit, gentlemen, which is a youth mental health and addiction program. Sam started with the United Chiefs and Councils of Mnidoo Mnising as the project manager for Gwekwaadziwin Miikan in the development phase. During this time, he conducted research on programming across North America and played a role in the development, advocacy for funding, and training and startup of the organization. In his continued work as executive director, Sam continues to learn with staff and participants how to best evolve the program to meet the needs of the vibrant Gwekwaadziwin community. And I also have the pleasure of introducing Matt to you. So Matt Maracle is a band member of the Mohawks of the Bay of Quinte with matrilineal ties to, I'm sorry, Matt, could you help me with this?
Sure. We like to throw lots of tongue twisters in there. Matrilineal ties to Chaging First Nation on Manitoulin.
Thank you so much. He's a graduate of the University of Toronto's Crime, Law, and Deviance program and has devoted his professional career to supporting growth within the Indigenous social service sector as a project and program coordinator. Matt has worked at the provincial, regional, and community level to support the development, facilitation, and evaluation of youth and community-driven mental health projects. Matt now serves as the Director of Operations at Gwekwaadziwin Miikan after serving as the 7 Grandfathers team leader since the launch of the program. In his current capacity, he is responsible for the development and implementation of operational growth and sustainability strategies, management of human resources, supervision of operations across all phases of the program, and the implementation and evaluation of program objectives. As an advocate for the development and maintenance of healthy communities, Matt strives to operate from a strengths-based lens on a foundation of culture and lifelong learning. So gentlemen, I am really excited to hear what you have to share with us after I had the opportunity to meet with both of you a couple weeks ago and to hear just a little bit about what you had to share. I'm really looking forward to hearing more about your program and how you've been able to so wonderfully serve the community in which you work.
Miigwech for that introduction. Yeah, we'll do a little bit of language lesson today too. There's a lot of very particular words in there, specifically Anishinaabemowin. So the program that we work for is Gwekwaadziwin Miikan, and we're operating here on Manitoulin Island. So if you just give me a moment, I'm going to pull up my slide deck here so everyone can see how it's spelled and see how much of a tongue twister it actually is when you try to put it all together. So just before we hop into things, I just want to, again, just introduce ourselves. Thank you for that bio. That saves us a little bit of the speaking points on our end. Again, my name is Matt Maracle. I'm the Director of Operations here at Gwekwaadziwin. I started in April 2016, initially as the team leader, overseeing the sort of on-site operations through the land-based program and across some of our aftercare phases as well. In February of 2021, I transitioned into this new position as we had some significant growth through that time. So we had a bit of a growth mindset through the pandemic, and fortunately, we're able to grow our program significantly through that time. And today, we're going to talk a little bit about just a bit of overview and some pieces. And we're completely open to questions. As much as we love talking and hearing our own voice, if there's anything that you're wondering about or any sort of inquiries, please toss them in the chat or the Q&A. I always find this thing works a little bit better. One, when we're face to face, which can't happen today, but two, when there is cross engagement. So if you have any questions, by all means, please feel free to share them, and we'd be happy to address them. And then Sam, I'll let you just do a quick intro for yourself as well.
Absolutely. I put Gwekwaadziwin about 15 times in my introduction, so that I really threw Jennifer off as well. In the private chat, which you folks didn't get to see, I tried to convince her that she could say it better if she sang it to you as well, but she didn't fall for it. So we missed out on that opportunity. Really excited to be here today, folks. I'm just looking at this picture that Matt threw in here, and when we say we built things from the ground up, I guess we mean it literally, because this brings back a lot of great memories of when I tried to convince our initial team that it would be a really great team building exercise if we built this timber frame building together. So it really was in the end, but of course we decided to do it on the hottest day of the year as well. We'll get into it a little bit more, but just while we have this picture up here, this is our beautiful timber frame workshop out on Clapperton Island. And I don't know whether you'll get to see it in the videos today, maybe tomorrow if you come to our panel presentation, but we actually build 30-foot canoes out here. There isn't hydro out there, so it's a lot of hand tools and things like that being utilized, but a lot of really interesting and beautiful work gets to go on and happen out there.
And miigwech, Sam. Okay, so we can cross the introduction off the list, and miigwech, Jennifer. And again, we are humbled and honored to be here to present a little bit about our program. There obviously is a lot of intersect between mental health and justice, and I think we all know that, and that's no secret by any means. But for us as a program, we're really going to focus on what we're doing to really support recovery models and sustainable recovery from an Indigenous lens and from an Indigenous foundation, trying to do things a little bit different and out of the box, so to speak. But really, before we can get to where we are today and where we plan on going, it always is important to recognize and acknowledge where we come from. So we're going to do a quick program overview and just talk a little bit about the program history, how it came to be, looking at the service gaps that we were seeing locally as well as across the province, and really looking at how we had a community-driven response that really spearheaded the direction of Gwekwaadziwin. Talking a little bit about the mission and vision that really gives us the direction for everything that we do in our pursuit of everyday good living, and looking a bit at the program model in phases. And that's a little bit of the moose, meat, and potatoes of what we're actually doing day to day, and some of the cultural components and some of the different interwoven models that we implement within the program as well. We're also going to talk about program philosophies, because I think that is something that's important too, especially when you're looking at Indigenous-led initiatives. It's not just about mainstream programming and how do we fit inside of that, but it's how do we create a foundation of traditional core models while still supplementing that with clinical core models and using two-eyed seeing approaches. There's a lot of different ways to look at that. Two-row wampums, you've seen this in some of the initial agreements between settlers and Indigenous communities. And how do we bring some of those philosophies forward to create a fully comprehensive and holistic wraparound model? Looking a bit about our participant care and strength-based programming, and discussing all of our relations. And then we'll cap it off with a little bit of ongoing advocacy piece and some of the pieces that we're doing as well. And of course, time permitted, we're going to leave a little bit of space at the end too, hopefully for some Q&A. But of course, as I mentioned, if anything comes up throughout the presentation, feel free to throw it into the chat or the Q&A, and whoever's not speaking will moderate that on the other side of things. So one thing that I'd like to start off with is just an acknowledgement of our people. There's a lot of times where we use just the words Indigenous as this sort of catch-all term. And for me, that's always been really difficult, because when you use the term Indigenous, yes, it can look at the collection and the general sort of philosophies and some of the universal concepts that you see within that sort of context. But the reality is there's so much nuance and complexity to what's under the umbrella of Indigenous, particularly within Canada and North America and the world at large, that I just kind of want to frame the context that we're speaking through. So when you look at Canada's Indigenous people, of course, we have our First Nations, our Inuit, and our Métis. Now, even within First Nations, you can see that, of course, their status and non-status. So we're not going to unpack that in today's conversation. But when we're looking at Indigenous people, those are three very distinct groups with very distinct cultures, customs, beliefs, protocols, shared histories, legislative impact, geographical location, and things like that, that create very unique experiences. Now, even with the First Nations, whether it's status or non-status, even if you look to the right and you see Ontario, the amount of First Nations diversity that exists within this province is absolutely massive. It's at such a large scale, whether you're looking at the Haudenosaunee Longhouse, if you're looking through the Lodge or going up through Cree territory. So it is important to recognize that, it isn't just about Indigenous programming, Indigenous people. That is, yes, the umbrella term, but under there exists such a rich component that we need to acknowledge as well. And with us being a provincially funded program, it is important to look at what does that mean in Ontario. So our First Nations population within Ontario is almost 400,000 people. The Inuit population is 3,860, and the Métis population is approximately 120,585. So you can see already that we're seeing already a vast difference just in terms of the demographics within just this province. And then when you start looking at the actual map to the right in the little infographic, each one of those lines are First Nations communities. So not only do you have the nearly 400,000, probably 500,000 people by now, but also different representation and associations with all of these different memberships. And if you were to sort of create a quarter or sort of quarter off the province into Northwest, Northeast, Southwest, and Southeast, even within those regions, there's fundamental differences just in terms of what they've seen in terms of interactions and engagement with the church, with Indian agents, with government, with schooling, with access to resources, et cetera, et cetera. So it really is a truly complex endeavor to really just use the term Indigenous because there's so much to it. And for us as a program, we're situated on Anishinaabe territory, but we do have a provincial catchment area. So that's something that we try to consider as well, is the different sort of practices, approaches, and cultural specifics that our participants are bringing into the program as well. Also, part of this conversation is looking at some of the socioeconomic barriers and considerations. So with our population, we are the fastest growing demographic in Canada, seeing a 54% increase through a 10-year period. That was up to 2016. And if my young family is any indication as well, it's grown significantly since then as well. We also have 78% of First Nation communities in Ontario being in Northern Ontario, with 77% of First Nations people living off reserve. So then when you start to unpack that a little bit, you're looking at some of the considerations and some of the historical impacts as well that have led to displacement and enfranchisement and all of the sort of complexities that play on an individual psyche and their own resilience or fostering resilience to where we are today. So we're talking about generations and generations and generations of systemic disparities, social inequalities, displacement, relocations, natural hazards, all those things that are leading us to where we are today. And of course, when we're looking at socioeconomic barriers and sort of considerations, with the average age of the Indigenous population being 33.6 years compared to 40.7 for non-Indigenous counterparts, it is a significantly younger population. So then you start looking at some of the social services that might be involved and some of the overrepresentation that we're seeing in different systems, whether it's incarceration, child and family welfare, access to healthcare, and of course, your main factors of education, employment, and income. So again, it looks a little bit different whether you're comparing Toronto to Sudbury to Thunder Bay to Sioux Lookout or Dryden or Manitoulin. But the whole point of this is that Indigenous representation is so vastly complex and so large that I'm not here to be the expert and representative of all Indigenous consideration. All we can really present today is sort of the lens that I've had and I've experienced as a Haudenosaunee Anishinaabe male who's grown up in Ontario, sort of between Northeastern and Southern Ontario. Also, before we hop into things, it is important because I think there is a significant distinction in why Indigenous-led initiatives matter. I often said there's a big difference between mainstream programming that is being delivered by Indigenous people and Indigenous programming. Indigenous-led initiatives are truly articulated, crafted, and implemented by Indigenous people for Indigenous people. So again, when you bring it back to some of the historical considerations of categorizations and labeling and enfranchisement and sort of a top-down father-son approach, so to speak, as opposed to two brothers on the same path, there's been a lot of I don't want to say coerce, but there's been a lot of directive in terms of how Indigenous populations and demographics should be doing their healing and how they should be responding to a lot of the challenges that they see in day-to-day lives. However, by supporting and advocating for and operating within an Indigenous-led lens, we're able to start to counteract a long history of government legislative programs that were initially intended to eradicate many elements of indigeneity. So Alan Corbier, a local knowledge keeper around here as well, and professor at, I believe it's Ryerson or York, often says, you know, all the things that were taken away are the things that we need to get ourselves back on track. And part of that is language, and part of that is land, and part of that is our cultural identity. So by being able to create a ground up approach from that foundation of cultural understanding, we're able to start building the resilience and the identity and some of those strengths that we need to actually create sustainable recovery models for our communities and building our healthy communities. This also allows for culturally appropriate and sensitive initiatives. Again, it's one thing to go through and completely have an understanding from a textbook and maybe a field placement and things like that. But really the culture is in the community. It's in the shared understanding, it's in the shared beliefs, it's in the systems, it's in the family networks, it's in the understanding of clan systems and spirit names. And it really creates the autonomy that's needed to have that self-sustaining capacity at the community level. So you're investing in community, we're building the capacity at the community level, and we're allowing the communities to sort of steer their own canoe down those rapids and to be able to traverse that in a good way based on the strengths of their community. And the flip side of things, if you have strictly only government support and only these government directives of how to deliver programming, if that goes away, then you're kind of left at stage one again. So by building that capacity at the community level, you really are creating a more autonomous and strength-based community that can support the individuals within it. I think also aligning to today, it supports community-led healing and justice. So as you are well aware, there's an overrepresentation of Indigenous demographic within the system. So by being able to look at community-led healing, we're able to not just throw the book at individuals, but really look at the root causes and the wraparound supports that are needed to encourage step forwards and growth as well. It could be diversion programs, it could be working with programs such as Gwekwaadziwin, but really keeping it local so that we're not creating further traumas and displacement and challenges and disconnect as we've seen historically, because we know that doesn't work. And of course, through that, we lead to cultural strength and prosperity. And most importantly as well, it provides opportunity for allyship. So not for direction and not for taking over someone's sort of, trajectory, but really for the opportunity to partner in a good way that allows each of us to maintain our customs, our beliefs, our lived experiences, our realities, and our solutions, but to be able to work together. And that's really where we're at now when we're looking at this sort of post-Truth and Reconciliation Canada. So that was just something as sort of the preamble before we hop into the program specific things. But with that, I wanted to pass it over to Sam Gilchrist to talk a little bit about the program itself.
Thank you very much, Matt. So I just wanted to go over, it's important to understand where we came from in order to see how we got here. This program is very much community driven. Prior to me coming on board, there was a really motivated steering committee created of community leaders, including former Chief Joe Hare of Chaging First Nation, as well as delegates from education, from tribal council, from local community health centers. And they really looked at programs from across the province and across North America as well. There was a program that they'd found that aligned with a lot of their values around outdoor experiential learning, as well as the need for education. However, it was missing some of the some of the aftercare and some of the cultural components. That program was Pine River Institute. So when I came on board in 2015, I had the opportunity to work with the founder of Pine River Institute, Dr. Karen Minden, and Pine River is located near Orangeville, if you're not familiar with it. It's a great program. And so we've always held a very close relationship with Pine River, and we continue to do so now. But one of the unique differences about Gwekwaadziwin was that the steering committee initially wanted to help those age 13 to 30. So when I started developing the program with Dr. Karen Minden, we realized that obviously there's a vastly different life experience from a 13-year-old to a 30-year-old. So one of the first things we did was to develop it into two distinct streams of a program, one for 13 to 18-year-olds and one for 19 to 30-year-olds. Now I'll talk a little bit about our journey to funding, but mostly today we'll be focusing on our 19 to 30-year-old program, as well as some other programs that have been funded since then. So when we started to develop it, the 13 to 18-year-old program, because it was so similar to what Pine River is doing, is very closely modeled after that. It is a 3-phase program that includes stabilization out on the land for approximately 8 weeks, followed by a live-in program with a large focus on education as well as family involvement. And then community aftercare, ensuring that there is a successful reintegration back into the community. And we'll get a little bit more into our 19 to 30-year-old program later. So we developed this amazing program, or we thought it was amazing anyways, and it came time to have conversations around funding. And so we met with both the provincial and federal government, and the conversation came along, this is an absolutely great concept, Sam and team. However, at this point in time, we're only able to fund one piece of the project. So we kind of went back to the drawing board and said, how can we move forward? We know that both these pieces are really needed. They're both really vital. Obviously, that early intervention aspect is really important, but what about those folks that are still struggling in that older age cohort as well? So we really looked at that and weighed the pros and cons. My own experience in delivering youth programming previously, I knew sort of what that entailed and some of the ins and outs of that, as well as in adult programming. So we decided that we would move forward with the 19 to 30-year-old program so that we could, one, illustrate that the program model was working and functional, and so that we could illustrate positive outcomes as well if it was working. And two, we knew the facility that we were going to be utilizing, which is kind of just to the left of this picture, wasn't necessarily conducive to youth programming. We had run a youth group home out of this building before, and it had its own sort of problematic issues in that regard, that didn't really meet the needs of youth. So there was those two reasons, but really we knew that we were hoping that we could illustrate that this program model was working so that we could further advocate for the youth section of the aspect of the program. Could I have the next slide, Matt? So I think to also really understand our program is to understand our mission and vision as well. So our mission is to serve our youth and their families and guide them to living the right way by integrating the wisdom of our traditional knowledge keepers, providing a program from stabilization through reintegration into the community, and addressing the individual needs of our participants. So, a lot of times mission and vision statements are just something that gets stuck up on the wall for accreditation, or, it's something that sits at the start of your policy and procedure manual. But we really try to look to these statements to see, how are they meaningful to the work that we're doing? How do we align ourselves with them and those sorts of things? So just to unpack this a little bit, Gwekwaadziwin Miikan has a couple of different sort of definitions within the language. Gwekwaadziwin itself is one of the 7 grandfather teachings, which means honesty, which is a beautiful sentiment, obviously within a mental health and addictions program. And then Miikan is road or path. So we take that to mean, you know, following that red road, that wellness path. But Gwekwaadziwin can also mean living the right way. So that's very important as well within the context of that mental health and addictions program too. You know, integrating the wisdom of our traditional knowledge keepers. So our traditional knowledge keepers play a unique role within our organization where they are providing support both to our participants as well as our staff, and they're involved in our decision-making processes right at, you know, they sit right at the clinical table, clinical meeting table with us as well, but you know, right through the gamut of our organizations when it comes to naming buildings or different things, different projects that we're working on, you know, helping us work on proposals and build those aspects right from the ground up. So that's a really integral piece to our program as well. The next part, we really wanted to be able to meet participants where they are at. And you'll notice, you know, sometimes I might slip and use the word client, but language is really important in the work that we're doing. And so we actually call our clients participants to try and illustrate that active participation and role that they're playing within their treatment as well. But we wanted to really have a client-centered, a participant-centered approach. And that's sort of what we're getting at here, but we wanted to meet individuals where they're at. You know, a lot of our staff had the opportunity to work frontline in a lot of different positions, myself included. I'd been an ADAP worker, you know, supervised different programs and different aspects, and worked with a lot of different clients, referring them to different programs. And sometimes there would be, you know, different aspects to getting into a program, such as, you know, you needed to be sober for 30 or 60 days. To me, that seemed really disingenuous when we were developing this program, because if a person could stay sober for 60 days, a lot of the times they didn't necessarily need our inpatient services. So we really wanted to meet them where they were at and walk on this journey with them from stabilization into that treatment program. And then, you know, aftercare was such an integral piece that the steering committee outlined initially as well. That was missing, and I saw that within my own frontline work as well. You'd have clients, participants go away to treatment. They would thrive in that supported environment, but when they would come back to those same people, places, and things, it tended to fall apart more often than not. So we saw aftercare as a really important piece, but what did that look like? So that's why we built in both live-in aftercare as well as community aftercare. And we're going to get into what that looks like as well. Could I have the vision statement, please, Matt? So our vision statement is healthy and prosperous Anishinaabe communities with youth oriented to living the right way by sharing knowledge and best practices so that Indigenous communities can become healthy and prosperous. I had a lot of opportunity to work with former Chief Joe Hare that I mentioned previously from Chaging First Nation when we were first developing this program. And I remember asking him, you know, Chief Hare, should this program just be for Chaging or for UCCM communities, or, you know, how will that work? Should it just be for those that identify as being Indigenous? And he said, you know, Sam, the mental health and addictions problem isn't just a Chaging issue. It isn't just a UCCMM community issue. This is a much broader issue. And in recognizing you know, our populations and the way that they move around across provinces, across the country, I think that the program should really be open to helping people and helping other communities get their programs started as well. And so that's really, we've taken that to heart. We've been, you know, we've had some amazing opportunities to, you know, bring this program to fruition, but we really tried to create a high caliber program and really set some best practices within land-based healing. And now we have an opportunity, such as today, where folks are listening to what we're saying, but we have organizations, communities from across Ontario, from across Canada, and beyond reach out to us on a weekly, if not daily basis, asking for help to how to get their own land-based program started. So that's where some of this knowledge sharing comes into practice, to try and help other organizations, help other communities on their own journey as well. Next slide, Matt.
Before we hop into this, I think also it is, I'm not sure if everyone is familiar with where Manitoulin is, but we are just located about an hour and a half southwest of Sudbury, so on the north channel of Lake Huron, Georgian Bay here. So it's not exactly an easily accessible location depending on where you're coming from, but it is an absolute beautiful location. And so when Sam was talking a little bit about whether it's Fort Chaging, which is one community on Manitoulin, or is it for all of the UCCM communities, which would be the bulk of First Nation communities on Manitoulin, that's where that consideration comes from, is looking at sort of that connection and all of our relations to the other communities at the province at large as well. So oftentimes we get the question a lot, what exactly is it that you do? Well, we do a lot. I think it always surprises even ourselves at times, just the magnitude of the program and how many moving parts there are, both logistically and clinically. When we first started the program, we had sort of humble beginnings of 18 staff. Through the pandemic, we saw significant growth and significant need for the program, with the waitlist for our program for the initial 10 beds really going anywhere between 140 to 180 people per cohort. So in that time, we were able to do a bit of advocacy for ourselves and able to expand the program. And we're currently sitting at 61 staff as of today. So within that 2-year period, where a lot of organizations were seeing reduced capacity in their ability to provide their services, we effectively doubled ours in that time. So what exactly did we double? Well, we looked at our land-based treatment, and within that, the phase of the program itself is a 90-day land-based treatment. So participants come into the program, they do their intake all at the same time now. We used to run continuous programming where we would run 24/7, 365. There was a lot of pros to that. There was also some challenges within that as well. And especially looking at once we moved into sort of the COVID reality in the pandemic world, we had to look at how can we do things a little bit differently so that we're not going to be at risk of having to reduce our capacity, and how can we sort of mitigate any transmission into our camp, because ultimately once people are in the program, we have a protective little bubble. We're out in the wilderness. We're not necessarily in major urban centers, and by not necessarily I mean not at all. We're out on islands near Manitoulin. We're up in Moose Country, and so we were really able to add additional beds and add additional sort of program pieces so that we were able to increase our capacity. So we do 90-day land-based treatment programs. There, participants that participate in the program are in the program for the entire 90 days out on the land. It looks a little different depending on the seasonal camp. It is 4-season wilderness programming in that time as well. We switch camps. We try to be mindful of, one, not creating too much of being mindful of environmental impact and also the blueprint wherever we are, but also we need to switch locations just based on different seasonal activities that we're doing. So for example, in summer, we're out on Clapperton Island where we've invested a little bit of infrastructure dollars there, and we've been able to create a nice camp setup with cabins as well as the workshop as well, but it also affords us the opportunity to do a lot of trekking. So some of the seasonal activities include a lot of fishing, expeditions, anywhere from 1 to 2 week canoe treks, and then always having that base camp as well where we're able to return to kind of reground ourselves and do some of the core programming as well. The programming itself is fairly structured as much as it can be out in the wilderness. Obviously, Sam likes to say around here, it's not a sunshine program, but it's an outdoors program. So whatever you're faced with on a day-to-day basis, you have to be able to adapt and pivot to the needs that happen at the beginning of every day. But through that program as well, it is very much looking at being connected to the land. It's about creating that connection. It's about removing the individuals from those person, places, as things in those settings where a lot of the repetitive behaviors and some of the maladaptive sort of responses are happening regularly, and move towards an area of stabilization. So we have our summer camp. We also have a fall camp, actually 2 fall camps, one up in Moose Country where we engage in community programming. We do a moose hunt, and everything that has been harvested goes to feeding the program as well. So then we're actually trying to create more of a self-sustaining sort of program here, where the animals that we harvest, we're able to use the skins for different activities. We create leathers for moccasins and mitts and things like that, and then we can use the proteins. And it's not just about going to a grocery store and getting your food. It's about understanding where we are in that food chain and having the respect for the actual harvest for sustenance. Once we're done the moose camp, we move over. We also run a trap line where we work with our participants to actually achieve their course to become licensed trappers. So we do that, and then we run a trap line north of Nairn Center, and then come winter, we're back on Manitoulin Island now in 2 different camps in Chiging and Chegwenda, where we engage in a little more, of winter-based programming, which traditionally for us is a lot of storytelling, ice fishing, and some outdoor recreational activities. So snowshoeing and hiking and doing different sort of land-based skill sets as well. So whether that's creating fire, making shelters, cooking outside, all those types of things, it's all part of the whole kit and caboodle, but it looks a little different just depending on which program you're in at which season. So as I mentioned, when we started, we were 10 beds, 19 to 30, and that was initially the core funding for the program. We saw a need, as I mentioned, there's a giant wait list around any cohort. And we're getting a lot of inquiries about programs for those 13 to 18 and then those for 30 plus. We were in a position where we were able to really move forward with the 30 plus programming because we simply had to add more prospector tents and get more cots and some more equipment. So we ran a pilot project where we had 5 beds for 30 plus programming, and we sort of piggybacked that onto our existing program. We did really well with that program. I believe through that cohort, we had an 87% graduation rate, and things were looking really good. So the response was to meet some of the additional wait list that we were seeing. We were then given another 5 beds on top of that. So then we ran sort of an extension on our pilot project where we were then able to run 2 10-bed programs, one 19 to 30 and one 30 plus. Again, with the success of that pilot project, we were able to fortunately turn that into annualized evergreen funding. So at this point moving forward, we're currently running 2 10-bed programs, one 19 to 30 and one 30 plus through our land-based treatment program. Is there anything I missed, Sam, before I hop into live and aftercare?
No, I think just, we'll talk a little bit more about programming, but just the opportunities out on the land with, our staff live out there with our participants for 7 days at a time. So when you think about things like building rapport, therapeutic alliance, our staff are out there going through going through the same things that our participants are, and the different opportunities and lessons that the land brings as well. But we've tried to create a program in that absolutely everything is a learning opportunity, a treatment opportunity for our participants. So, we're not doing absolutely everything out there for them. At first, we are a bit more supportive, and we have pre-made meals and we're helping with cooking and things like that. But as the program goes on, participants are taking on active roles with cooking and cleaning and camp maintenance, and it automatically through this, it builds those life skills, those interpersonal skills as well. If our participants, they're living out on the land in prospector tents in -30, if they aren't communicating with their tent mates about who's going to get up in the middle of the night and put wood in the fire, then they're going to wake up pretty cold. They've got -30 rated sleeping bags, so they'll be okay. But they're going to wake up a little bit cold, a little bit uncomfortable getting out of the sleeping bag there. So it's automatically creating those interpersonal skills throughout the programming as well as our other models, including Red Path, which we deliver within the program as well.
Yeah, and that's a great point. A lot of it is about creating success and finding strength within the participants, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. But one of the things with our summer program, which is always fun to do, is our initial transition into the camp from intake day consists of a 4-kilometer paddle, and it's across a channel that we've passed many times. We're very comfortable with it. The winds can pick up in there quite a bit, but it's really amazing to see the first day coming into program. You get your gear on, we travel over together, and then you hop in the canoes and you do this quick kind of jaunt across the channel, and you pull into the bay. And the immediate success that is felt from the participants really sets the tone for the rest of the program. And if they're able to conquer that and they're able to face that and succeed and overcome that barrier and that obstacle, it really does set the tone for the rest of the program. That being said, we do train our staff. All of our staff are trained Ontario Recreational Canoe and Kayak Association instructors. So we're not just sending them out there and hoping for the best. It really is a guided activity, but it's really remarkable too, because in some of the responses you'll see, oh, you know, our first day of program, we went and we paddled across the ocean to get to camp. It was amazing. It's just really neat to see the different perspectives of having that success, especially for individuals who may not have had a lot of success in their life up to that point. So after the land-based treatment, the second phase of our program is the live-in aftercare. And so that was the sort of red house that you saw in the history slide that Sam was talking to a little bit earlier. And so within the live-in aftercare program, we have up to 12 months of live-in aftercare support. So individuals are finally given, you know, that opportunity for supported living in the pursuit of education and employment goals. We have 11 beds on site. It's staffed 24/7. It is co-ed. I guess I should mention all of our programming is co-ed programming, and it gives an opportunity for looking well, again, there's plumbing and there's Netflix, which is always great, but it also gives someone a safe and supportive environment to live in. Oftentimes going back to that community reintegration, there's a lot of challenges. Sam alluded to it earlier. You go back and it's a lot of the same people, places, and things, and a lot of that internal change that's then, you know, meant to be projected into community and to contribute to family, that environment isn't always welcoming and open to that change or conducive to that sustained recovery. So the live-in aftercare home is really just an opportunity for additional supports for up to 11 beds where participants can transition and apply into the program for that 12-month period. Also, because it is very much client-centered or participant-centered or person-centered, depending on the terminology you're using, not everyone stays for the 12 months. Sometimes coming off the land, an individual may just need sort of a 2-week reset or a month to start to put some of those pieces together for that transition back to community. So again, it's not us creating a top-down approach of this is what you need to do, but it's meeting the participants where they are and working with them so that they're able to have a little bit of say and autonomy in their treatment planning as well. So within the live-in aftercare program, the expectation is that they are either pursuing education or working towards or working or volunteering. And then that sort of shapes the direction for where they go within those 12 months period. So there's a lot of continued support with basic life skills, resume building, even something as simple as getting your status card or getting your driver's license or any sort of ID, all those kind of first steps that sometimes things that we might take for granted are put into place. And then we start building a progressive plan from there based on the direction that they seek. After the live-in aftercare, the third phase of the program is the community aftercare program. So with that, there's sort of two channels of this now. One, there's the reintegration into community itself, where you have up to 6 months of community aftercare support. So they work directly with the community aftercare counselor to start thinking about community reintegration plans, thinking about safety planning, who their supports are there any wraparound services that we need to kind of bring in towards any sort of case management. And it's really supporting the individuals to maintain all the pieces so that they're not going about it by themselves. So there's also remote support and group sessions. And I think with sort of the onset of Zoom and opening that technology, we're able to do a lot of great virtual programming as well. Alumni check-ins, groups, one-on-ones, referrals within the community itself. And it's really kind of taken a different shape since in the last 2 years, really. In addition to this too, beyond the community aftercare program, we were successful in an application for a capital project where we built a new 5-bed community aftercare sober living home. So that's also on site, just not too far from our live-in aftercare home in our administrative office. Now, individuals who are not able to secure safe and sober and supported living environments, or are facing sort of issues with homelessness and community transition planning, we now have this opportunity with 5 additional beds on site where they can engage for up to another 12 months of supported living. Now, once they get to there, the expectation's a little bit different because they're a little bit further along their healing journey. So it is a little more autonomous in terms of that, where they don't have necessarily the 24-hour support in-house, but we still do have our eyes on the facility. We're able to monitor it because it is on site, and our actual administrative office and the live-in aftercare office or building is staffed 24 hours. So really, when you're looking at it from the point of intake and land-based treatment, if someone were to participate in the full continuum of care that's offered through Gwekwaadziwin Miikan, you're looking at 27 months of treatment and aftercare support for an individual, as well as an additional 6 months if they were to require to reintegrate into their community. I guess the other part that's sort of, although I have the arrows here, they can be a little bit of a misdirect because it's not always that same sort of trajectory for individuals. Individuals who are participating in the program who may have things like, pets or kids or family members that they need to return to in their respective communities may opt to go right into community aftercare. And so the way that we facilitate that is typically through the halfway mark of our 90-day program. Our live-in aftercare counselor and our community aftercare counselor start engaging in weekly programming out on the land as well, introducing themselves and the different roles and opportunities within both of these programs, and start working with individuals to start doing some of that safe planning in terms of what the next steps are. So someone who's in the land may be going back to community immediately after graduation, so they'll work with our community aftercare counselor to start setting up that plan. Or if they're interested in the house, then they would work with our live-in aftercare counselor to then facilitate some sort of safety plan and start getting all those pieces in place to make that safe transition. The program goals are also different within each part of the program because when we look at treatment versus aftercare, there are fundamentally different goals in terms of stabilization and moving forward from there. So within the land-based treatment program, as I mentioned earlier, it really is about, for the individual, really focusing on that sense of safety, security, consistency, and stabilization. In the community setting, it really is trying to break down some of those barriers where we see a lot of notions of individual success and individual sort of resource and direction, and starting to create that more traditional understanding of the collective approach in the community. As they say, it takes a village, and start working on some of that emotional growth and social skills in that setting. So there's a little bit of basic life skills, there's success building based on land-based activities, there's self-management skills. So we see a lot of grounding and coping techniques that have to happen. And of course, there's a lot of stabilization just in terms of the physical withdrawals that individuals may be experiencing coming off of that, or coming into the land-based program as well. So really that 90-day program, it really is very progressive in terms of moving from that sort of instability and that inconsistency and that active usage into stabilization, starting to look at not just the addiction as the symptom, but what are the root causes that have led us here? What are the experiences? What are the traumas that have been experienced? And how do we move forward in that? And so those are supported through both one-on-one supports with our land-based counselors, as well as with our traditional knowledge keepers, but also through group activity, both in sharing circles, healing circles, as well as group activities and different sort of traditional teachings, whether it's medicine making, medicine walks, or other ceremonies that might be appropriate for the individuals at the time. Now, again, it's not very cookie cutter because it is person-centered. So we, again, as Sam mentioned earlier, we try to meet individuals where they're at. So they may be at different points. Someone might be looking for, their spirit name and their colors and their helpers and trying to put those pieces together, where others may have a lot of that in their past and maybe looking more towards fasting ceremonies and sweats and those types of things as well. So it does look a little bit different. We have that overarching sort of umbrella of programming, but the experience for each individual is unique to themselves within that time. The goals moving forward into live-in aftercare, we're really focusing then on, we've worked on that stabilization, some of the emotional growth and self-management skills, a bit of the social skills, and now we're sort of transitioning that into a housing environment. So we're looking at stable living, additional life skills. It's a little bit different cooking on, the barbecue or the three grill burner, and doing that in a prospector tent. To then now we can talk about budgeting. We can talk about nutritional intake and understanding our macros. Looking at, as I mentioned earlier, resume writing, cover letter writing. Do we need to get our transcripts? Are we pursuing additional educational attainment, et cetera, et cetera? But really, again, meeting individuals where they're at, because we've had some people who have come through the program who, are master's level candidates in education, Red Seal chefs, all these types of things, and those who haven't graduated elementary school. So again, the life skills development is structured to the individual that is participating in the program, but it really provides that safe, stable, supported, and sober living environment where they know that whatever they're doing in community, they're able to return to that environment at the end of the day. Through that program as well, a lot of that is supported through one-on-ones weekly, as well as house meetings, and then closing circles at the end of every night as well. So there's a lot of familiarity just in terms of the structure of the day that's brought forward from the land-based program into the live-in aftercare. And so, of course, we're looking at supported community reintegration. Those are making those connections with employment agencies, with educational institutions, working through any sort of concerns within the sectors of justice or health, and trying to put all those pieces together for individuals, and about maintaining that continued therapeutic support for the individuals. I can't remember if I mentioned it in the last slide, but they also have a primary live-in aftercare counselor that is available to them, as well as additional support workers throughout the day within the program as well. The goals of community aftercare are very straightforward. Then we move to looking towards, safe and supported community reintegration. So is there anything that needs to be set up for individuals when they're going to community? Can we set up additional therapeutic supports that support their continued wellness? How do we work towards economic prosperity? Is there anything in the realm of education and employment that we know are huge factors in terms of creating success in community? And looking at some of those local supports, is there any other, social services that need to be tagged or anything of that like? So again, it's very different for each individual going through the program, but the ultimate goal through that community aftercare is looking at community reintegration and securing the local supports for continued wellness and economic prosperity. Briefly too, I want to mention our circle of care. So again, it's not just that the participant is here and they're alone through the entire time. Everyone that is employed by the program is responsible for maintaining and supporting that therapeutic relationship with the individuals. So whether you're a support staff, an admin staff, culinary, data, counselors, traditional knowledge keepers, whatever it is, we all have a role in maintaining this community and maintaining the trajectory and the safety within the community. So as you can see just in this quick little infographic here, the participant is surrounded by additional peer support. So it's really about looking at conflict resolution and how do we support others, and how can we be a contributing member of this community. But also there is more direct therapeutic supports and direct traditional supports with our traditional knowledge keepers and different land-based activities that we do. And of course, you can see the world under the participant, because everything that we do as a land-based program with those land-based healings and philosophies and structure, it is grounded on the idea of connection with land and finding our culture and our identity through that support, that respect, that honesty, and that bravery to kind of face those challenges through the program. Quickly, before I see a couple of questions popping up there, or maybe just one, I just wanted to look at some of the expected outcomes here. So again, participating in the program, we of course have our expected outcomes as we move forward. Some of those are just healthy future orientation, increased perception of quality of life. So again, working with individuals to see what is it that they see as living that good life. Again, this isn't something that's prescribed. It's about something that they can take ownership of and really work towards. Decrease in crisis indicators like suicidality, hospitalization, police involvement, running away, homelessness, really looking at some of those particular stages of development and creating the foundation of safety to be able to navigate and reduce any sort of crisis indicators. Looking at decrease in problematic substance use. Now, while the program itself is an abstinence-based model, meaning we don't have any usage within the program, we do understand that there is obviously a point for a harm reduction lens as well, because people have different sort of goals and objectives as they come into the program. It's not always necessarily 100% sobriety and abstinence. So working with individuals to encourage harm reduction measures as well is an aspect of it, depending on the individual. Increase in positive mental health and well-being, increase in physical health. So again, just by being out there, breathing in that good oxygen, being away from the cities and being able to engage in, harvesting your own food, responsible for the gardens, the camp chores, all that sort of stuff. There's a natural sort of occurrence of an increase in physical health just because we're now active. We're getting out of the basements and the rooms and kind of those sort of environments. We're getting into somewhere where one, there's structured activities, but two, it's also nice that if you need to kind of just clear your head, you're able to go for a walk down a nice path or along the shoreline and do things in a good way. Also looking at increased knowledge and experience with Indigenous culture, resulting in stronger identity and increased resilience, increased connection to the land and nature. Again, that's really a core tenet of what we're doing. Looking at those life skills for employment readiness and also including educational engagement, where we can increase graduation levels from elementary, secondary, and post-secondary education. And with that too, we do have a 100% connection rate of connecting our live and aftercare participants with either education or vocational opportunities. So that's been a great success in the program as well. Okay, Sam, did you get a chance to look at the questions there?
Yeah, I've got the questions here. So the first question we have is from Jennifer. She's trying to convince me to sing this question too. No, I'm just kidding. What makes a participant eligible or ineligible for the program? So I can answer that if you want, Matt. So around eligibility criteria, when we were originally developing the program, as I mentioned, our conversations with Chief Chohair, he wanted it to be open and inclusive as possible. So it is open to everyone with an Ontario health card. Sometimes we get folks from out of province or from the far north that have found their way into Ontario and happen to have a health card. So that's fine. Our program is based upon Anishinaabeg values and principles. So of course we do ask individuals to be open to that, even if they are from a settler background or from another background. If you're coming into the program with some preconceived prejudice towards those values, then probably not the best fit for you for a program. Around exclusionary criteria, if an individual has a history of fire setting, then that's something that poses a flag for us. Additionally, active auditory and visual hallucinations. Now, I say that with a grain of salt because we have had a lot of participants with active auditory or visual hallucinations. So it is a matter of going through the referral process and our intake process to see where they're at, if they can mitigate that, if it is a fit, because for those experiencing that, being out on the land can sometimes perpetuate that further, and that's not something that we want to do. We don't want to be another bump in the road in their trauma journey. So that's something we will consider, as well as another exclusionary criteria. It might be a history of violence that hasn't been mitigated by any sort of treatment. So we still have a lot of individuals with a long history of violence and what that looks like and different types of assault. But if they've done some work towards it prior to us coming in, then we can potentially look at them for a client. I've got another question here, Matt. It says, I work in Toronto with individuals who have been trafficked, and sex trafficking also has a huge overrepresentation of young Indigenous women. I find traditional treatment options are not as inclusive as they could be, nor do they address identity for the different Indigenous youth. Is there anything like Gwekwaadziwin Miikan in or around Toronto? Well, Toronto's just a short skip and a jump over to Manitoulin, really. Matt loves to make that drive. In and around Toronto, I mean, we work a lot with Toronto Native Child and Family, and we actually just did a big training with them this summer as well. around, they're launching a lot of different outdoor programming. It's just outside of the city where they do their stuff, Matt? I can't recall exactly where, but.
Correct. I think they're about 2 hours east from the city and where they purchased their new camps.
Yeah, so they've got a campground that they're working on and launching with some programming. So that might be something interesting to check out. But yeah, absolutely. You know, we do have a lot of individuals come from Toronto as well. Another one that comes to mind as well is Anatig Healing Lodge, which their main site is in Midland, and they have another program in French River as well, as well as I follow, and now I'm going to butcher a name here, Tungsquivit Inuit, and their program Mama Sarvik, I saw just launched in Toronto as well. So those might be some pieces to look at. But that being said, we also do have a lot of individuals come from Toronto. And just looking at your question, and I'm not sure what you meant by inclusivity or identity, but just to address it from our own point, you know, that was something around diversity that we looked at too. So when working with individuals, however they identify, that's how we work with them within the program. I know some other programs, it's a little bit different around traditional teachings around male and female teachings, but we work with however that participant identifies. Okay, I think we answered all the questions right now. Video, you're muted.
Sorry, there's one more question here that I just saw in the answered column, but I'm not sure if we answered it, so we'll just do a quick review. I guess my question is more around being more proactive with the neighborhood officer and not reactive. Is there capacity for regular meetings / contacts so clients have contact on a regular non-emergency basis to avoid crisis calls?
Well, within the context of our community aftercare, that's certainly something that we do and have regular contact with our participants. I don't know if Matt is fond of this saying, but I like to say, never waste a good pandemic. And in the pandemic, we had the opportunity to grow and do a lot of different things. I guess Zoom existed prior to it, but we weren't utilizing it as a tool. And it's been an amazing tool for us within the context of our community aftercare, because we have regular alumni meetings where whoever wants to be involved from our alumni can gather with our community aftercare counselor. And sometimes there's different topics that they talk about, but you know, a lot of it's just checking in too. Our participants checking in, talking about what's going right, what's going wrong, how they can mitigate those issues. A lot of peer support, individuals talking about, okay, this worked for me, maybe it might work for you. And just that peer support aspect as well. But our community aftercare, a lot of it's just our counselor just, you know, checking in with our participants, kind of keeping that open door policy with them. You know, we do have folks that come through the program more than once too. Maybe there's something that they didn't address the first time through. Maybe like Matt said, not everybody's goal is sobriety. They get back out into the world. Maybe they stopped using cocaine, realize alcohol is still an issue, so they come back to maybe address that from a different lens within the context of the program as well. So I don't know if that answers your question or not, Sabina, but if there's something we missed there, feel free to ask again.
Yeah, I think there's just the sort of add on there too with capacity for regular meetings with external providers, I believe is my understanding of that. So we try to do our best, and you know, we are very fortunate that we and it comes with its perils, of course, but we have a very small population. We say there's 6 degrees of separation in the world. There's about 1 degree of separation from everyone on Manitoulin. So just by virtue of going to the different schools and, you know, engaging in different community events, whether it's working at the recovery breakfast or volunteering at a powwow or things like that, there is a lot of crossover where community members don't always just have to show off that one sort of professional hat that they're wearing. Through the program itself, we also try to introduce different supports. So for example, when we do the trapping course, M&R officers will come out and they will kind of do a little bit around legislation and talking about, why their role is important, and that every time you see an officer, whether it's M&R, conservation, or police, it's not necessarily always crisis, but there are roles in community. We also have counselors and support workers who come from all walks of life. So we've had those who have police backgrounds, others who have done more traditional sort of Western support coming from justice, nurses, things like that. So it really is just about sort of addressing some of those preconceived notions and some of those labels and stigmas that might be attached, and just showing that, within this context, we're all sort of humans within this community trying to get to the same goal. We all have the same superordinate goals for everything that we're doing here. Okay, so we can talk about this until we're blue in the face, and we often do, but sometimes it's really difficult to just hear about the program without sort of that visual. So we do have a quick video that we wanted to show that just sort of highlights some of the programming as well. We have a couple of videos that we'll show throughout today and tomorrow, this being the first one. It is a good sort of visual representation of what some of our summer programming looks like. But again, this is also just sort of one more step towards that experiential learning. Until you're out here on the land and doing the programming, it very much is a different thing. But I do believe that this is a very accurate representation for some of our summer programming. So I'm just going to stop the share while I pull up the other video quickly. And then just make sure, maybe Jennifer, you can let me know if we're having any audio issues or anything like that.
Sounds good.
We've become separated from our connection to the earth. And to fix something, we have to go back to where it was broken.
Once you reconnect with the land, your heart and your mind, then you're on a good path.
Gwekwaadziwin Miikan is a land-based healing program that was developed from United Chiefs and Councils of Mnidoo Mnising, and it was recognized several years ago that it was needed because there was a lack of treatment options available on Manitoulin Island for Indigenous persons, as well as non-Indigenous folks.
When we first initiated Gwekwaadziwin, we didn't want to just duplicate what other programs were doing. It's really about getting out in the outdoors and connecting. And then when we look at the cultural and spiritual aspects of it too, the land is intrinsically enveloped within that aspect as well.
We're looking after their spirits, because in the world today, everyone wants to look at mental health, but we're always forgetting to put the spirit first.
We are giving them opportunity to sit with themselves that they wouldn't have had. Remembering to trust in Creator and creation, and knowing that things have been put here for you forever and all time to support your healing and wellness.
We have a mixture of people from different backgrounds. We all look out for each other. Having those positive coworkers who are supportive, and it feels more like a team.
Running a land-based program is extremely complex. We've always made training a priority. A lot of our staff are cross-trained in everything that we do. That teamwork, communication, ensuring that our staff are well-trained in both therapeutic and clinical aspects, as well as those land-based aspects, has really strengthened the program, and we all play a role in each of these participants' recovery.
It brings it back to that human element. I think in a lot of ways, our relationship with the participants here is often reciprocal. They're just as much of a teacher as we are. And I think that's one of the most important things for us to do, is to discover ourselves and refine and hone our skills. And you definitely have that ability to do that here.
This place is really special. Everybody just has this one end goal, and that's just to help people and make people feel whole again.
It's giving people enough time in a therapeutic environment to really connect with what they need out of the program, and it's different for every single person. I love what I do. I'm doing what I do because I love the program. I believe in the program. It's given me a sense of purpose that I haven't felt before.
Okay, hopefully everything shared okay with that. Excellent. Okay. So again, I'm not sure if that's what you were envisioning, but that's a little bit of the summer programming. It looks a little bit different come winter time and a little different in the fall, but a quick shout out to PWL Films, who's been accompanying us and hanging out with us for the better part of the year, just in capturing some of the footage so that we can just have some of this archive footage and promotional footage as well to kind of show the things that we can't necessarily, we can articulate to the best of our abilities, but we don't always do it justice until you see it. So popping in, I'm also just trying to be mindful of time here. The time's sort of flown by. We do have a few other pieces that we do want to address, as well as kind of leave some opportunity for any questions if there's anything. But when we talk about, you know, walking together and looking at partnership and allies and those types of things, for us it starts with the foundation of culture and traditional understanding, in spirit, in principle, in philosophy, in action, and responsibility, and in our own call to arms, or call to action. So it starts with the 7 grandfathers for us. That is actually the name of our 19 to 30 or our 19 plus program. So Gwekwaadziwin Miikan being the organization, the 7 grandfathers program being that 19 plus program. So these are more or less the, as our TKK says, it's our moral compass, it's our guiding principles. Everything that we do, we try to align its action with one of these teachings, and we use these as those teachable moments with all of the participants as well. When they come in, we acknowledge the bravery and the honesty that it takes to have that insight and that introspection and say, I need help and I can't do this alone, and to put their faith in a program, sometimes, you know, hundreds of kilometers away, to go and to really address some of those root causes that have led to where they are in life. Love is a core fundamental tenet of everything that we do. There's that unconditional love for individuals. There's that unconditional love and respect for our land. And no matter where someone comes from, this is a completely judgment-free zone. It's about not just where we come from, but who are we and where do we go and what are our responsibilities moving forward. The wisdom and the truth often comes within working with our knowledge keepers. They're able to share their wisdom, their lived experience, what they've seen, and to bring back the wisdom of our traditional teachings, our ceremonies, and our protocols, to find our place where we are today, and how do we interact with the world about us, and how do we have respect for ourselves, and how do we have that self-love. So we introduced this right from the initial, from the onset of the program through intake and admissions. It's something that no matter what it is, there is a teachable moment in every activity that you could possibly have that aligns with one of these teachings. There's also the stages of life, which is another core teaching that we utilize here with the program. It aligns very much with if you're sort of I guess aligning it to Erickson's stages of development, or if you were to look at, I believe it's McKinnon's maturity model. The stages of life is essentially that sort of tiered stages of development for individuals. And you'll notice that they're broken up into sort of 7-year increments here. So each one of these have teachings of what an individual should experience, what they can expect, what are the teachable moments, what are sort of the parameters of that lived existence within that stage. So we have the good life, the fast life, 7 to 14, the wandering life, 14 to 21, the truth stage, 21 and 28, the planning stage, which is akin to sort of parenthood and community contribution, 28 to 35, the doing stage, which is that more kind of adult aspect where you're between 35 and 42, and then there's the elder stage where you sort of move into then sharing your wisdom, your teachings, and your experience with the community members as well. Now, as you can kind of see, when individuals come in with that 19 plus program, you would expect an individual to be coming in sort of in those stages and the facets of the wandering life and the truth stage. But even when you look at things like the maturity model, if an individual hasn't had that sort of strong community or that healthy community, and all of those things that are conducive to that natural sort of traditional development and trajectory, it could be, you know, alcohol abuse within the home, it could be unsafe environment within the community, communities. It could be an experienced tragedy or any sort of trauma. And a lot of that is very prevalent because of the intergenerational traumas and the systemic disparities and the relocations of Indigenous communities. So really looking at our stages of life, although you would expect someone to be in wandering life and true stage, they may still be stuck in sort of those aspects of good life or the fast life, where we're then looking at, meeting the individual where they're at and trying to get things recalibrated for them to take those steps to move into the next stage. And this teaching, we're not going to dive into it because I could never do it justice, especially in 15 minutes. But really, it's about following the trajectory along an eagle feather. So that's why that feather is there. And then another core model, of course, is our 4 directions, looking at east, south, west, and north, and the different responsibilities and sort of understanding of what those direction means and how that applies to different holistic concepts using the medicine wheel. Sam, are you able to talk a bit of the clinical core models?
Absolutely. Do want to apologize. My kids just got home from school, so hopefully they don't make any noise. So when we look at this and when we look at both approaches, both the traditional approach and the clinical approach, I'll get into it a little bit further, but just give me 1 second here. Sorry, my daughter's trying to be super quiet, dragging a toy across the floor. When we look at that, we utilize what we call the 2-eyed seeing approach. So really trying to utilize a blended approach coming from both a Western and a traditional background. So we talked a lot about participants centered already and what that looks like. So obviously the empathetic understanding of the participant, trying to walk with the client so that they can take a leadership role in their personal recovery, and approaches that meet the client needs. So Matt mentioned it already. We've been fortunate that, developed the program from the ground up, and we tried to look at absolutely everything we could, and not just utilizing a cookie cutter approach. We tried to consider everything that we were doing. Is this best practice? Why is this done? Why are other treatment centers doing it? Are they just doing it because that's the way it's always been done? One case in point is 21 and 28 day programs. Why are they that length? Is that magically fix someone, meet their trauma needs? Is that when some of those aspects are addressed? And we kind of found out along the way that used to be the shore leave from the military. So that's why a lot of treatment programs started to be developed that way, not necessarily because it was best practice. So we made our treatment program a bit longer, but looking at a lot of other aspects too, that people have a family to get back to, jobs to get back to, things like that. So 3 months isn't always necessarily a magic number, but it allows for some of the teachings and lessons to be further ingrained. It's very difficult when we look at, can you just jump over so all of them are visible, Matt? When we look at trauma-informed care, sometimes for our participants, it's taken a lifetime or multiple generations to get to the trauma that they're having right now. It's not always going to be magically fixed within the context of 3 months. So that's where our aftercare and our community aftercare come into play as well. The maturity model, it's kind of interesting. I keep getting these black squares popping up, Matt. I don't know what that is, if there's something that's happening on your end, but the maturity model, it's really interesting. When I was developing it, that's what Pine River uses, and I brought that back with me, and I'm talking with our elders, and that's when they came up and they said, Sam, maturity model sounds great, it's really trauma informed. However, we have pretty much the same thing, just called stages of life. So although we talk about it in both instances, both as the maturity model and stages of life, there really is that 2-eyed seeing approach. But oftentimes a lot of different models were taken from different cultures or Indigenous communities as well. When we look at the hierarchy of needs or different things like that, that was developed from different Indigenous cultures as well. And I mentioned the 2-eyed seeing approach already. We'll just continue along here, Matt. Do you want me to take this one?
Oh, I can speak to it. It's good. I mean, a lot of it is just this is just meant to kind of tie it together. So we have the sweetgrass there because it's about braiding these approaches. And when we're trying to offer a holistic, fully comprehensive program to individuals coming in, there's a lot of different needs. Sometimes there is a need for that medication. Sometimes someone might need a little more of the traditional supports. There may be different activities and ceremonies that support the individual in their journey, but we didn't say it was one way or another. So what we try to do in the work that we do is we create what we refer to as our organizational bundle, and it's about everyone who comes through, be it staff, be it participant, comes in and they share what it is that they have to bring to the table. It's about presenting some of our solutions, some of our successes, some of our understandings, and some of our models to the organization and lending it to that so that other people can see how it's enacted in real life and how it's kind of approached, and they're able to share their experiences as well, but they can also pick up from the bundle. So the two-eyed approach is really about blending both of these models together so that we have everything in our bundle that we can offer and provide for the participants as well. So again, it's not saying one is better than the other. I think it's just different needs for different individuals, and to the best of our ability, that's something that we try to employ from day one. Was a combination of that foundation of cultural lens and understanding, but then building or providing opportunity and room for both those Western and traditional practices on top of that for whatever meets the individual. Strength-based programming, again, we have another video. What time do we have until, Jennifer? Is it 1:45?
You got it.
Okay, so we won't necessarily hop into the next video just because we're running out of time here. But with strength-based programming, through the First Nations Mental Wellness Continuum, which was a model that was put forth by Thunderbird Partnership Foundation, the core components of wellness looked at purpose, hope, and belonging. And so that's something that we look to do within our program as well. Purpose, having individuals find their identity away from active usage, away from whatever it is that they're going away from, and to really work with themselves to figure out who am I and what are my responsibilities. Purpose in Mnidoo Mnising is an Anishinaabe teaching just around everyday good living and how we live our life. And when you go back to some of those components of traditional lifestyle, it wasn't about active usage and partying and TikToks and all these different things. And it was really just about living a good way, living the right way. That Gwekwaadziwin Miikan, it's very similar to Bamadziwin. And there's a lot of universal truth in that because it's not just an Anishinaabe concept, but various cultures have their own sort of understandings and twists and plays on it. Haudenosaunee, for example, have something a donut surreal, which is the same way of living life in a good way and how to live the right way. And a lot of it comes down to gratitude. It comes to hope. It comes to thanksgiving, and a lot of these core components that we're trying to not just teach, but also role model in our everyday sort of workings with people within the program. Hope, it's success and gratitude. So we offer a lot of sema, which is one of tobacco, one of our traditional medicines, is putting that down, is creating that connection with creation. It's opening up that line to speak to creator in a sense that we look around us and everything that we have in creation, we should be grateful for. And it's not about the things that are man-made or constructed or the iPhone or anything like that. It's really just about the beauty and the magnificence of the trees and the water and how everything that we need, not necessarily want, but everything that we need to survive is at our fingertips when we're out here with that natural connection with land and knowing where we fit within that order as well. And again, we talked a little bit about building success right off the hop. So that builds hope and that creates belonging when they've had that success and they're now invested in the culture and they're invested in a community. And it doesn't mean everything's all hunky-dory and rainbows, but sometimes there's going to be conflict and that's life. But there is that belonging, there is that opportunity for conflict resolution, there is that opportunity for creating success and for creating things outside of the normative behaviors that already existed in order for that to happen. And when we look at strength-based programming, again, it's not that everyone has to come out and be a professional fisherman at the end of it, but if someone catches just that one fish through 90 days, that is a huge success and we celebrate it. And the strength that we then celebrate becomes the perseverance and the commitment to catching that fish. That's just one example. Every individual that comes through the program has their strengths, and sometimes it's just about us helping them find it and bring it to the forefront. the other part too with what we're doing and with the connection and sort of a traditional philosophy is looking at all our relations. It's about the individual coming to the program and having that opportunity in the center of the circle there. You see the self. There are very few times in our adult lives where we have 90 days completely dedicated to working on ourselves. So in that opportunity, we're able to really challenge ourselves. We're able to look at some of our preconceived notions and some of our learned behaviors, and we're able to challenge them in a good setting, and we're able to build success and create the best version of ourselves, whether that's 10 days, 45 days, 60 days, or 90 days into the program. You have that opportunity to really focus on yourself and that relationship to yourself. We talked a little bit about that unconditional love and that self-love, that care and that honesty. That honesty is the first step with developing the truest version of oneself. And in theory, within the context of this teaching, and again, we don't have time to go through all the teaching, nor do I think Zoom is necessarily the appropriate setting for it. But with that version of yourself, you're able to then move forward and to contribute to your family. Within that setting, you might be a son, a daughter, a mother, a father, an uncle, an auntie, a cousin, whatever it is, but you create that best self, and then you move forward, and then you contribute and you provide that opportunity and that version of yourself as a resource, as a helper, as a friend, as a support into your family. If you're able to get your relationship with the family put together, and then you have the strength within the family setting, you're then able to contribute that family to community and to create the maintenance and the building of healthy communities, to role model healthy living, to role model healthy active lifestyles, understand all of those pieces. And within this context of this teaching, that in theory should ultimately lead to the healing and the connectivity and the relationship of all of our nations. So it really is sort of that reverse hierarchical reductionism, where we work on self and we start looking at how does it create, how does what I do today make a difference for the greater good and for that bigger picture. And that's something that we try to employ as well within the context of our work. Sam, we have 5 minutes here. I don't know if we wanted to hop into research and outcome measurements or provide an opportunity for questions, or maybe Jennifer has an idea.
Yeah, Jennifer did say it was all right if you did play the video as well. What we could do is save research and outcome measurement for tomorrow during our panel discussion as well, and dive a little bit deeper into that. But yeah, if we just wanted to open the floor first for any questions, I think we've been answering them ongoing. But if not, if you wanted to play that next video and we could wrap it up from there and spend the rest of the time with the panel tomorrow.
Great, yeah, I think that works. Did we respond to methadone or any of the replacements?
No.
Okay.
Sorry,
so,
I didn't see that question.
Yep. So are participants able to come in if on methadone or another type of replacement therapy?
Okay, yeah, great question. Where did you see that?
It's kind of hidden in the chat log there.
Oh, okay. So this has been something that we've kind of worked towards for a while. When we first started the program, we didn't allow methadone within the context of the program. There's a few different reasons. One of our local communities had a band council resolution against carries of methadone, and we utilized their territory a lot. So there was sort of political community logistical issue around that. What we did start to use was Sublocade. So that is a monthly injection of Suboxone, which we found works really well for us. We don't have to bring someone out each day to get their medication or for the urine screenings or different aspects like that. So that works really well for us. We did start a pilot project this year where we did a heck of a lot of training, policy development, and logistical infrastructure pieces, and we did start a pilot project around methadone. So that's something that we're looking at incorporating on a regular basis moving forward. It might just be for only certain cohorts because our program is nomadic in the sense that it moves constantly through the seasons. It may not always logistically be possible, so we may have to plan certain intakes for methadone. But to answer in short, yes, we do have opiate replacement options. I think there's another question there. I just can't pull it up yet.
I'll moderate this. Oh, can you repeat the name of that injection form of methadone?
Sublocade.
Here, I can try and type it into here.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's become quite a bit more readily available. We haven't had any issues with our participants getting funding for it as well. And it's been really helpful. Just like, we've had great success with monthly injectables for psychiatric medication as well. It's been of huge benefit to our participants, particularly being in really rural and remote areas.
Okay. So we did have some other slides to share today. I think it does tie into what our panel is going to address tomorrow anyways. So really what we're missing today is just talking a little bit about our partnerships. And again, very simple. We're never of the idea that we can do this on our own. It takes all sorts of people within the community to support the program, working with our ministries, working with our partnered agencies in the community. So we're going to talk a little bit about that and then really hop into research and outcome measurements, because one of the things that we're seeing, especially as we have this novel sort of approach to programming, is where's the evidence? What's the evidence-based outcomes of everything that we're doing? So we've been engaging in a number of initiatives to procure some of that research and outcome measurements through the last little while. So we'll present a little bit of that information at the panel as well. And again, I think the ongoing advocacy piece, it's important to kind of see that this isn't kind of this is really just a portion of the overall goal. We really are looking to address programming at all stages of life, looking at the different sort of components. So there is a piece that we'd just like to share with anyone who's able to make it tomorrow. We do speak at 11:45 via the link that's sent out for tomorrow's date. And then we'll kind of address some of the different approaches to treatment and why we're doing what we're doing, and talking about incorporating aftercare as well. So we're hoping tomorrow, again, because it really is great when we're able to have that two-way engagement. So if anyone is here for day 2 tomorrow, if you have any questions, please feel free to write them down or send them into the chat or anything like that. And we're happy to field any questions, because we want to make sure that you're gaining something from this as well. So if there's any curiosities or questions, then we're absolutely happy to field those as well.
You took away my thunder. You're going to invite you guys to speak tomorrow. Obviously, you're coming, but I was going to remind everybody who
I don't know if I'm frozen or Jennifer's frozen.
This program. Oh, are you losing me? Sorry.
I think you're frozen there, Jennifer. I didn't hear any of that.
You guys are fantastic. This program or programs that you have built up on Manitoulin are incredibly inspiring to me. I can speak as one of the Crown attorneys that I see on the line here. It's fantastic to hear that there are, if I could use the word, alternative opportunities for participants to tackle the issues they've got in their life. It's fantastic. And I really hope that a little bit more comes closer to the GTA, although I agree with you, it's not that far away to get up there. So really thank you so much for your time and all the hard work you put into putting this presentation together. We really do appreciate it. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow. We've got lined up at tomorrow at 9:10 is when our first panel is going to begin. And then, like Matt said, or Sam said, sorry, I can't remember which one, we've got you guys back at 11:45. So look out for a new link for all our participants. Look out for a new link for day 2 tomorrow, and come with your questions, come with comments. I'm sure these gentlemen will be more than happy to answer everything you've got for them. So thank you, everybody.
Absolutely. Miigwech, Jennifer. And if anyone wants a scenic tour of Manitoulin Island in our program, Matt would be happy to do so.
Oh, I will take you up
Glitch.
on that one day, Matt.
Yeah, it'll be February 13th.
Oh, okay.
In the heart of winter.
Yeah.
Okay, miigwech everyone. Have a great evening and looking forward to tomorrow's panel.
Thank you, miigwech.
Take care, folks.
Okay, everybody, we're going to sign off for the night. Thank you so much to everybody again. Come with comments and questions tomorrow. We've got a great lineup ready for you. If you want to see who we've got, you can check out our website at justicetreatment.org, or you can reach out to any of us and we'd be happy to forward that information to you as well. Thank you and take care.